So something kind of interesting happened to me today. I made a tweet about how China is a country that uses gang rape as a form of torture. And I was really surprised by the response. A lot of people were like, source? What are you talking about? People had no idea.
What was your source? Were you talking about something specific or just...
Well, just that China is a country that uses gang rape as torture. This is something try it out. Google China gang rape. You'll see a lot of information about it.
So
I'm not sure.
Visual.
Yeah.
It's not visual.
Well, but I mean, we had a Uyghur on the podcast who was talking about what happened to him.
Yes.
We've had many Uyghur women have talked about what's happened in the vocational training centers.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, sometimes technically it's not gang rape. It's just rape. But that's not really better.
Sometimes it is just rape.
Yeah, it's just one person.
Sometimes it is gang rape.
Yeah.
Falun Gong practitioners experience this a lot too.
I mean, I think it is a pretty common thing that happens in the prison and labor camp system. Especially, there's this thing that they do where essentially the guards will let the prisoners, like if you're a Falun Gong practitioner or, let's say a house Christian or a Tibetan, somebody who gets put into a labor camp or a prison, right?
Because there's regular, actual criminals in there as well as dissidents.
There's criminals in prisons. It depends what you're in. If you're in a re-education, if you're in kind of one of those brainwashing centers, it might just be all Falun Gong or whatever, right? Because they're trying to essentially, they call it transform your beliefs. But if you're put into a regular prison, there are actual hardened criminals in those prisons. So what they might do is just have the prisoners essentially, kind of do the torture for the guards in a lot of ways to kind of when the new prisoners of conscience come in. So in cases there have been documented cases where women were put into male prisoner cells and left there.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it's technically not the guards doing the raping, right?
Which is interesting because this is not something that is just a few cases of localized abuse. This is part of the system.
Mm-hmm.
As we were talking with Levi Browdy last week, these labor camp, these detention systems, the Communist Party studies what works in these systems, and things that work, they train other places to do.
I think there were two Uyghur women who went on BBC a few months ago and talked about the systematic rape that goes on in these concentration camps in Xinjiang, and how in many cases it seemed that these were outside men who were coming in and actually paying for the privilege of being able to rape Uyghur women. One woman talking about how she was essentially put in charge of grooming the other women for the young pretty girls to be raped essentially. So it's not something that's condoned.
So they're basically running a human trafficking brothel.
I mean, I'm sure they're making money off of it too. The thing that happens, there's a lot of corruption in China, and there
is.
Yeah, there is. Right. We've only talked about it a million times, but in terms of the prison system, where you have kind of the prison guards or whatever, often there's kind of an extortion racket they run on the side where they might extort the family members of the prisoners to if you pay us some money,
we won't rape your family.
Something like that. Or, you might be able to see your family member. Or, it's just you have to pay for them to be in prison, essentially. There's all different ways to do it, but it's a money-making system because a lot of China's government, the financial system is kind of dysfunctional in a certain way. It's a lot of the local governments have to find funding for themselves for a lot of things.
It's the same reason that hospitals in China do forced organ harvesting, because it's a way to make money.
A lot of money. A huge amount of money. But so prisons are also incentivized to make money.
So that's where the forced labor comes in.
Yes, definitely.
So, H&M or some big Nike, some big company contracts with a local supplier or a local company, and that company contracts with another local company, and that company does business with the labor camp. And then
often disguised as something else, so you don't actually know.
So you have enough pieces of the supply chain that it's hard for the Western company to track the extent of it if they're not super incentivized to track the extent of it, and I think they're not.
Yeah, and I think that often it is the Chinese companies that they're working with that actually know what's going on, but they're incentivized to hide it from the foreign company. I remember Financial Times did this article a few years ago about essentially prisoners in China peeling garlic to be exported. When you get a lot of the world's garlic apparently comes from China.
And also, and this will tie back into everything, China makes most of the world's solar panels. It seems like those are being made on the cheap by ethnic Uyghur slave labor.
Yeah, I mean, we can't say all of them are being made that way. I think it's that recently a group found that some of the companies that make the polysilicon or whatever, the actual silicon powder that goes into making the panels, maybe their factories are based in Xinjiang mostly, and there's questionable labor practices.
Yeah, and so this ties into something, well, the main issue. John Kerry, Biden's former vice president, Biden's climate envoy to China, just got back from China and said something like, the U.S. and China, we disagree on human rights issues, but we have to work together on climate issues. So with the solar panels, okay, we have to work together on climate. Solar panels are a way to deal with the climate, but they're made by ethnic slave labor. Do we ignore that because we're talking about climate? And this ties back into the whole, China is a country that uses gang rape as a form of torture. This should be the way any discussion about China should be framed. It's the same issue with the genocide label. It's a highly charged emotional way to talk about it. And you couldn't have John Kerry saying, well, the U.S. and China, we disagree on using gang rape, but we got to work together on climate.
Right, or we disagree on genocide, but
it's the same kind of thing.
But I think if you could say that climate is so important that we really should ignore these other things, which firstly I think is stupid logic, but let's say that's your logic. It still doesn't work. And the reason is, if China is a country that uses gang rape as torture and is putting ethnic minorities in, labor camps, then why would you trust them to fulfill their commitments to any agreement you make with them on climate? It is a dishonest and evil regime. And just the idea that, yes, they could be doing these horrible things to their own people, and yet somehow they'll be trustworthy with international agreements, on top of what they did to Hong Kong, which is a total violation of an international agreement, on top of what they did with the South China Sea, which is a violation of more than one international agreement. It's insane to trust the Chinese Communist Party to do their part on climate change.
I think semi in Kerry's defense, because this was the other part of his quote, was something about how the U.S. and China agree that that climate change is something that affects their citizens of their countries. So it was almost like he was saying, well, China understands that this is something that is in their best interest, but I don't think that's necessarily true that they see it as in their best interest.
Well, I think that's not quite what Kerry said. I think what Kerry said was that climate change is the big issue that affects the citizens of both of our countries. China understands that. I think he was saying from his perspective, I mean, obviously the Chinese government must understand that if this is hurting the Chinese people, that affects them, the Communist Party. Completely missing the fact that the Communist Party is an authoritarian regime that uses gang rape as a form of torture. They don't care if people go without water. They don't care if people start to protest about the climate because they won't be able to.